crazy powers of Feminist Cocktail Hour, and I'm thrilled to be here mixing it up with Prospect Theater Company. Tonight, we are going to be throwing it way, way back to the days of yore when theater was served with a side of polite lobby chatter and an overpriced cocktail. The bad news is that we are absent the lobby, but the good news is that this cocktail is well priced and can be made from the comfort of your own living room. I'm calling this evening's cocktail a Belva-dka Lockwood Lemon Fizz. To make it, you are going to need some vodka, some sparkling water, some lemon juice, some pineapple juice, some sugar, some basil, and some fresh minced ginger. This cocktail is, of course, named in honor of the lady of the hour, Belva Lockwood. Now, Prospect is going to tell Belva's story as only they can through a fantasia of song, story, and movement. I'm here to give you the basics and whip up a cocktail. Or should I say, a cocktail. Now, who was Belva Lockwood? I like to think of Belva as like the 1870s RBG. She was sort of this famous, unlikely feminist folk hero. You know, lady lawyers would post her portrait on their office walls, women would name their babies after Belva, and her face was used to sell products ranging from bonds to a nerve tonic that she endorsed alongside Clara Barton. Interestingly, this nerve tonic actually was thought to be quite effective. Perhaps because it was 20% alcohol, which is actually a slightly higher ABV than this cocktail, which we're going to start. We're actually going to start real simple, literally with a simple syrup. We're going to take our tablespoon of minced ginger, add it to a tablespoon of water, and a tablespoon of sugar in a small mason jar. Then you're going to secure the lid and shake it up, combining the ingredients to make a simple syrup to begin this cocktail. Now, Belva's beginnings were also simple. She was born in 1830 in rural upstate New York. Her mother was only 15 when she married Belva's father, a farmer. So there was no reason that Belva should have felt as she did, that she was destined for greatness, capable of achieving miracles, as you will hear more about. However, Belva's father had less faith in his daughter. When Belva came to him and told him that she wanted to go to college, he told her plainly, no. Boys go to college, girls get married. So that's what Belva did. At 18 years old, Belva married a local man and a few years later had a daughter named Laura. And her fate as a farmer's wife seemed sealed until she had a stroke of luck. Her husband died in a mill accident. And I know this sounds sad, but in a lot of ways, it really gave Belva her freedom back. I mean, look, it's the 1840s. Women don't have many rights to begin with. You know, they can't enter into contracts. They obviously can't vote, but married women have even fewer rights. They can't own property, and they were seldom permitted to work. As a widow, Belva found that it was now a necessity to work in order to support her child. So she went to secondary school and ultimately college in order to improve her prospects in the workforce. After she graduated with honors, Belva became a preceptress, which is to say a school administrator. She was earning $400 a week, next to the $600 a week earned not by other male administrators, but by the male teachers who she oversaw. The other male administrators were earning well more than twice what she earned, even though she was a head of household just like they were and had more than her own mouth to feed. She bore this indignity for a full decade before finally pursuing her dream of making a difference for women in this country and for herself. She moved to a city where Horace Greeley observed, "The rents are high, the food is bad, the dust is disgusting, and the morals deplorable." Yes, Washington, D.C. Some things never change. There she met Ezekiel Lockwood. Ezekiel was a Civil War veteran, a minister, a dentist, and a man 30 years Belva's senior. But none of that mattered next to the fact that he fully supported Belva's unusual desires to learn and to lead. I am going to lead us back towards our cocktail shaker. We are going to take some of this beautiful fresh basil, about 3 to 4 leaves, and we're going to muddle it with 3/4 ounce of lemon juice. Now, when we muddle something like this, we don't want to smash it. We really just want to gently release the juices from the leaves. That is what it really means to muddle an herb. Now, Belva had spent years muddling through life as a wife, a mother, and an educator. Belva was finally pursuing her goals in earnest. She applied to law school in 1870 and was unsurprisingly rejected on the basis of her sex. After all, the administrators were worried that having a lady in their class might be distracting for the male students. Now, of course, by this point, Belva was 40 years old, married, and by her own admission, somewhat stout. Makes you wonder how hard up those law students must have been. Now, eventually, she was accepted into the National University, now part of George Washington University. She was accepted with 14 other women, 2 of whom, herself included, finished all of the coursework. At the end of their coursework, neither of these women were granted diplomas, with the justification that to give a woman a diploma from the university would devalue the degree. Obviously, Belva could not let this stand, so she found a loophole. In the university's charter, it designated the President of the United States as the ex officio president of the university. So, Belva wrote to President Grant a long, flowery letter asking nicely that he review the fact that she had completed this work and deserved to be a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. The letter went ignored. So Belva tried again. Dear President Grant, I have finished this curriculum. I demand my diploma. 2 weeks later, she had it. It shouldn't shock you to know that becoming a lawyer was for Belva not just as simple as getting a diploma. To prove that she deserved to be a practicing lawyer as a woman, she had to make her case again and again and again. Though I will tell you, Belva had no shortage of clients, and who knows why? Maybe it was because her rates were lower. Perhaps it was because people wanted to see what a lady lawyer looked like. Or maybe it was because she had spent years making connections in D.C. and was a damned fine lawyer. I guess we'll never know. But every time Belva had to argue a new case, it seemed that she had another new bureaucratic hill to climb. The first thing was that she had to be admitted into the bar in D.C., a hurdle she eventually cleared. She also became the first woman to practice law in Maryland, although the court that admitted her rescinded that admission just shortly thereafter. And then beyond all of this, there was that highest bar she had to clear, the bar to the federal bench that would allow her to argue in front of the Supreme Court. Belva came at this issue from 2 fronts. She worked with men in Congress to get a bill passed, while at the same time appealing to the Supreme Court itself. In 1876, the Supreme Court voted 6-3, no girls allowed, nya nya, nya nya nya. So Belva went back to Congress. She drafted a bill herself, officially called an Act to Relieve Women of Certain Legal Disabilities. This bill was introduced by an ally in Congress, and in 1879, it was passed. Only a few weeks later, Belva became the first woman to argue in front of the Supreme Court. I will drink to that, and so can you. So we're going to add 3/4 of an ounce of pineapple juice to our cocktail shaker, and then we're going to add 1/2 ounce of that simple syrup that we mixed up earlier. After that, you can pop in 1.5 ounces of vodka. Although, if you are a temperance advocate like Belva, you can feel free to omit the alcohol. Belva was a temperance advocate, as were many other women's rights activists in her day. She was also a pacifist and, of course, a well-known suffragist. Belva's philosophy on suffrage and women's rights can basically be summed up by this quote: "Women will never have equal rights until we take them, nor respect till we demand it." These ideas were somewhat at odds with other prominent suffragists of her day, like Susan B. Anthony. Susan B. Anthony, who believed that given the chance, the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, remember, would eventually give women the right to vote. Well, Belva pushed back against this tact in person and in print. It was her platform that women needed to establish their own party. And this idea caught the eye of Marietta Stow, an activist who had already already established the Equal Rights Party and was looking for a woman to nominate for president. In 1884, Belva Lockwood accepted that nomination and became the first woman to run a full, legitimate campaign for president. Now, of course, she didn't win, but she did receive, it seems, more than 4,000 votes and decided to run again in 1888. Belva was able to travel the country campaigning because her husband Ezekiel had passed away in 1877 and her daughter Laura was now grown and had a child of her own. Belva, of course, ran on a platform based on equality. She was looking for freedom for women to divorce, freedom for women to enter into contracts, and to have jobs, to get equal pay to men, to have equal access to education. But more than that, she was running just to demonstrate the idiocy of denying women suffrage. I mean, she was running for president, but she couldn't vote for herself. Ultimately, Belva knew that she wasn't going to win, but she ran, to shake things up. And that was totally Belva's style. Belva sought the spotlight. I mean, she went around town on her tricycle. The tricycle, like the bicycle, was a sign of female autonomy and Belva's preferred method of transit. She didn't care if someone might, see a little bit of ankle. She was a woman who was in her 50s but believed in the importance of calisthenics. So what I'm saying is Belva was used to a certain amount of ridicule, and during her campaign, there was no shortage of political cartoons and criticism from luminaries like Susan B. Anthony, who believed that her campaign made a mockery of the women's movement. None of this deterred Belva Lockwood. Belva's life after her foray into politics was just as rich and as varied as her life before. She kept herself busy, making money on the lecture circuit, and her house was always bustling, doubling as boarding house and as her legal offices. She did actually continue to practice law into her 80s and actually won her biggest Supreme Court case in 1906 when she was 76 years old. She won it on behalf of the Cherokee tribe, a settlement of $5 million, one of the largest settlements up till that date. A sparkling achievement to top off her legal career that we are going to acknowledge with some sparkling water to top off this cocktail. Now, the late, great Ruth Bader Ginsburg referred to Belva as a woman who would not be put down, an advocate for justice who unsettled society's conception of women. So why don't we hear more about her? Well, there's of course the easy answer that we do not do enough in our history classes to tell the story of women. But there are more complexities surrounding Belva. For one thing, she didn't take the time to write her memoirs. She was a busy lady, and there was no biographer writing her story contemporaneously. More than that, Belva's daughter, Laura, who was basically her support staff at her legal practice and also wrote in the newspaper, a little gossip column in D.C., she passed away when she was only in her 40s. She even left her 11-year-old son to her 71-year-old mother. And it was this boy who ultimately would inherit all of Belva's belongings. And he chose to sell all of her papers to the Salvation Army for scrap. Luckily, Lady Lawyer Lockwood's legacy was so impactful that more than a century later, historians, storytellers, and theater makers are working to make sure that her story continues to be told. And it's a tale that's like this cocktail. Bright, effervescent, inventive, and lasting. Cheers, my dears! Now, there's lots more of Belva's story to be told. Make sure to stay tuned after the show for a talk back with the cast and creative team. But for now, sit back, have a sip, and enjoy this premiere screening of Lady Lawyer Lockwood Rides Her Tricycle.